I'm Dr. Dave Janda. Welcome back to the Insider Insight Show. I am honored to have back with me someone who is a national treasure who focuses on the safety and security of every American, Michael Cutler. He is a huge fan favorite, and every time Mike is on our radio show, or every time Mike does a video interview with me, I am inundated with requests of getting Mike back as soon as possible. I believe it's imperative that you have the background of someone, not just of some short-term basis, but where this person has been in life's road, to be able to discuss the issues at hand. The issues at hand today are about the safety and security of our constitutional republic and every American citizen. And our discussion today focuses on immigration, and in particular, illegal immigration. And there is no better expert on the issue of immigration than Michael Cutler. Little background on Mike, because his background is not only exemplary, but it is very, very comprehensive as it relates to the immigration issue and safety and security issues. Mike spent 30 years of experience he has with the former Immigration and Naturalization Service. Positions included an immigration inspector assigned to Kennedy International Airport in New York. He was also an examiner to the unit which was responsible for adjudicating petitions filed by United States citizens and lawfully admitted permanent resident aliens on behalf of their alien spouses. Mike was also a criminal investigator, a special agent for the INS in New York City. He was also the INS representative, to the Unified Intelligence Division of the DEA in New York. He was promoted to the position of Senior Special Agent assigned to the Organized Crime Drug Enforcement Task Force as well. Bottom line, folks, Mike Cutler's career was unusual in that it provided him a grand tour, if you will, and gave him extensive insight into many aspects of immigration, and also provided him with an intimate view on how immigration impacted other law enforcement agencies within the United States and how it impacted every American citizen. One of the big fallacies is that immigration is a huge issue as it only affects our southern border. As Mike Cutler has educated us over a number of years' time, every state is a border state because every state has an international port of entry. And he has also taught us that rather than focusing just on the 2,000 miles of the southern border, we have 100,000 miles of border that is open, potentially open, 24/7 for illegal immigration, with the resultant effects on our safety and security and public health. Mike's website, Michael Cutler, Cutler, michaelcutler.net. It is my honor to welcome back to the Operation Freedom platform, Mike Cutler. Mike, welcome back.
Thank you, Dave. Thanks for the great introduction. Yeah, I mean, this is something I've been saying forever. And, lately, as aliens coming across the southern border are being moved around the country, finally, the pundits, the supposed journalists, every state is now a border state. No, every state has always been a border state, and not because we're moving them around. By the way, and we do have a huge population in New York, speaking from personal firsthand experience, of aliens who ran the southern border. We have major communities of Central Americans and so forth living in New York who ran the border. But we also have many aliens who are here because they came through Kennedy International Airport and never left. We have aliens who arrive on boats. I was the Marine Intelligence Officer for INS for a couple of years, where I went out with the Customs and Coast Guard boarding parties to search for stowaways and contraband. And then we have a northern border. New York City, most people are shocked. If you say to them, which city has the greatest number of illegal aliens, they'll tell you Los Angeles, Houston, Dallas. New York City. We hit the trifecta. New York State shares a border with Canada. New York State has a coastline and seaports. New York State has several international airports. And Now suddenly we're seeing these alarming headlines. The cartels are now moving into the city. Now? Now? I was part of DEA Intel back in the 80s, and I was promoted to senior agent, as you mentioned, with the Organized Crime Drug Enforcement Task Force, where I had desks at the FBI, DEA, ATF, worked with local police, worked with law enforcement from other countries, including Canada, Israel, Great Britain. I got an award from the government of Japan helping them with the case, which also dispels this nonsense that this is about Latinos. I am astonished. And after 9/11, I was averaging 20 to 30 TV interviews per month on all the networks. Mm-hmm. And around the time that the Supreme Court decided Citizens United, which stated that unlimited amounts of money could be pumped into political campaigns, the climate shifted overnight. It's as though there was an earthquake and the ground opened up. Mm-hmm. In fact, we need a new position in the government, that of the official auctioneer. I personally like the guy from Mecum, but there's others who are out there. They could consider their possibilities. But this is about money, and it's about a country that now knows the price of everything and the value of nothing. We are having a major conflict that is escalating with China, and we're bargaining from the worst position of weakness in the history of America, because China tomorrow morning could turn off the flow of all of the materials that they produce for us, including, antibiotics and pharmaceuticals. Mm-hmm. How in the world do you negotiate when they can strangle you with the snap of a finger? When we were attacked at Pearl Harbor, America manufactured everything here. We were the arsenal for the world. Mm-hmm. What are we going to do now? Produce slingshots overnight? This is what we have done because corporations don't give a rat's tail about America or Americans, only about the bottom line. And you know what? Guess who the corporations employ on their payroll? Every elected representative, just about. Mm-hmm. Think about the employee-employer relationship. Mm-hmm. If you have a boss, your boss gives you money and tells you what to do, how to do it, and when to do it. You either comply or you get fired. Campaign contributions create an employer-employer relationship. When I was an agent, I couldn't take a cup of coffee when I was on duty. Mm-hmm. How many billions of dollars get poured into political campaigns, not because these guys are ideologues and say, oh, I like Charlie, let's help him. No, they give money to both candidates for the same position. Mm-hmm. How is that possible? Because they don't care who wins as long as they win. So I'm going to tell you something. I no longer support the notion of America first. That's right, I don't. Now, I haven't lost my mind and I'm not disloyal. We need to change America first to Americans first.
Agreed.
Okay?
Agreed.
Because America first are wonderful companies. Outfits like General Electric and General Motors. GM got how many billions of dollars in bailout money, mm-hmm. and then built factories in Mexico and China.
Right.
America first? Really? And then they slap that flag on the package and say, rah, rah, America. Or they say, rah, rah, whatever political wind blows in which direction. They pander to anybody that's a potential customer, and they'll do whatever they do to fatten the bottom line because their corporate executives need to make ever more money. In the 50s, the average CEO made 50 times what the average worker made, and that's cool. If you're a boss, you should make more money. Generals are better paid than privates. My supervisor made more than I did. That's cool. I get that. Mm-hmm. But today, the CEOs are getting hundreds of times more money than the people who work for them. And the perks, and I was on a conservative radio show not long ago. We got into a big fight about capitalism. I just want to touch on this before we move on. Mm-hmm. But it's important to have context. And the guy said to me, under capitalism, there's a guarantee of opportunity, not a guarantee of outcome. I said, well, as you bring in an army of foreign workers, increasingly, there is no guarantee of opportunity. The opportunity is going to third world workers willing to work for third world wages under third world conditions. And the only way Americans compete is to accept third world wages under third world conditions. And that long term turns America into a third world country. Let's be very clear.
Okay? Agreed.
But I said this idea, there's no guarantee of outcome. There absolutely is a guarantee of outcome. Not under capitalism. I said, really? When Boeing literally crashed and burned with their 737 MAX jet, the CEO went out the door with millions of dollars. How did that happen? When Jeffrey Immelt ran General Electric into the ground, he went away with millions of dollars. How did that happen? Don't tell me there's no guarantee of outcome for the people at the top of the food chain. Right. Consequences are minimal. The people that work for them and bust their tail and give up lunch and come in before sunrise and stay past dinner hour without getting a nickel more out of dedication get waltzed out the door by an armed security guard to make sure that, God forbid, they don't take a pen or the stapler on their desk that has the company logo. While the CEO gets driven home in a stretch limo and they put a check in his pocket. No guarantee of outcome. This isn't capitalism. This is a perverse form of corporate welfare. And what the corporate greed is leading us to is turning America into a communist country. My dad, may rest in peace, was a wise man. My parents never went to high school, but there's a world of difference between being intelligent and being educated, as we're seeing. And my pop, who was a tradesman, and to me, tradesmen rock, because without them, we'd be living in caves or under trees, said to me, Mike, if you want to turn a capitalist into a communist, take away his money. And if you look at the decimation of the middle class, what are we doing?
That's exactly it.
The house that I'm in, I'm speaking to you right now from what used to be my bedroom. My parents bought this house when I was 11 years old. They died when I was in college within a year of each other. This was my bat cave, if you will. This was my fortress when I was 21, because I've been on my own since I was a kid. So this gave me a sense of stability. It was the house they bought, and I can still feel them here decades after they left, after they passed on. And so my father bought this house for roughly 3 years of his annual pay as a construction worker back in the late 50s. Today, this house would cost the average construction worker over 10 times his annual pay. Now, what does that mean? It means that housing is out of reach of ever more Americans. The system is failing them. So when kids who know nothing about communism or capitalism wake up to the harsh reality that they can't afford to move out of their parents' home when they're 30 years old because they're saddled with student loans and housing is in the stratosphere, and someone comes along and sings the siren song of, we'll help you, guess what? They go for the help. And the Republicans certainly aren't the party of the handout, but the Democrats are. Look at what Biden's tactic was after COVID. Let's send you more money, more money. Let's buy your vote. You want more money? Vote for the Democrat Party and we'll give you more money, right? By the way, all the other Americans are paying for it, and our grandchildren will be paying for it because we're into debt up to our eyeballs. But for the person who can't put the lights on, the offer of money is a welcome offer. And the greed of the right is too blind to understand it. I've had people say to me, how dare those people in burger joints want $15 an hour? Well, how much you want to pay them, $1 an hour? $15 an hour is $30,000 a year. I can't support my dog in New York City on $30,000 a year. So this level of greed, which I think is unparalleled, the destruction of the middle class. Alan Greenspan testified for Chuck Schumer back in 2009, said the solution to wage inequality is to make American high-tech workers compete with foreign workers. And if we did that, we could get rid of their wage premium, call them the privileged elite. How's that for chutzpah? And said the solution is make them compete with foreign workers. We slashed their wages, and now we greatly reduce wage inequality between Americans with skills and those with lesser skills. In other words, communism. And when I approached the Republicans about it, they changed the topic. Why? Because the Republican I spoke to was Bob Goodlatte, the Republican chairman of the House Judiciary Committee that in part oversees immigration, the FBI, the courts, the Marshal Service, and so forth, didn't want to talk about it. And finally told me how his son is brilliant on computers and would love to see many thousands of brilliant Indian programmers come to America. And I said, what about the Americans? My first wife, who died of cancer tragically in her 30s, was a brilliant programmer, MBA in computer science, Phi Beta Kappa graduate. The people who worked for her and with her had comparable credentials. They were all Americans. And you want to displace them with people from India? Well, my son believes that these people from India are brilliant, etc., etc. Well, I looked up his son, Bobby Goodlatte. Look him up. He got his start with Zuckerberg at Facebook and made $1 gazillion. Not quite, but quite a bit, by bringing in foreign workers. And Bob Goodlatte himself was an immigration lawyer who specialized in H-1B visas.
There you go.
Now, the economy is in the tank, and it's crashing. It's a slow-motion crash, but make no mistake, we're headed down.
Right.
CNBC had this alarming headline, companies got to act quickly because otherwise all these brilliant foreign workers that we desperately need are going to be deported.
No.
Deportation happens when you violate the immigration laws, not when your visa expires and you go home. Just like you go to a hotel, you rent the room for 2 weeks, and then they tell you, we hope you enjoyed your stay, here's your bill. You're not being dispossessed, okay? Mm-hmm. If you're here as a temporary worker, you're here as long as the job is there, and you understand that from day one, and when the job goes away, you go away. Why is no one saying, with all of these jobs going away, we need to make certain that Americans get the jobs? They don't care about Americans getting the jobs. They don't want educated Americans. They want stupid Americans who go out and buy pet rocks. Mm-hmm. Think about it.
That's true.
Right? So this is about exploiting Americans, and I love it when bankers tell you that they offer products. I never knew that 3-Card Monte was a product. Then what the hell do I know? And recently, Brit Hume on Fox News was wailing about the illegal immigration. He said, Americans are going to be turned off to immigrants. What are we going to do? We need tens of thousands of foreign workers, and the Americans are going to be against this. We are a nation of over 330 million people, and we need to import workers? Isn't it like bringing sand to the beach?
Yes.
Or water to the ocean? I'm old enough to remember when Sputnik was launched, President Eisenhower said, we need to make damn sure that every American kid gets a solid education in math and science so that America can lead the world, because this is a technological era that will depend on increasingly highly educated Americans. And you have people like Ted Cruz running around saying, for America to lead, we need to import the world's best and brightest. We had a major conflict, he and I, when I said to him, Senator, I'm from Brooklyn, and where I come from, we have a term for the world's best and brightest. We call them Americans, and he went ballistic. Is that representing the best interests of America? No. And that's why my position is Americans first, okay? I just wanted to get that out of the way, because everything we're seeing is about money.
That's right.
3,000 people were killed on 9/11. Many more subsequently died because we were lied to by the government. The same thing, I believe, is happening in Ohio with the train wreck.
Agreed.
The air is safe. The water is great. The cops were told, don't wear masks when you're working on the pile. Now, I don't know if it's accurate, but I was told it's because then Mayor Giuliani, who, by the way, wanted to suspend the mayoral election because we have this terrible disaster.
Right.
Didn't want people to wear the mask because it would cheapen real estate value in Lower Manhattan. I was told that was the fear. Maybe I'm wrong. If Rudy's out there, he can tell me if I'm right or wrong. And we ironically worked with Rudy when I worked with Senator Al D'Amato to create the aggravated felon reentry law that made reentry of criminal aliens a 20-year felony. Up until then, it was a 2-year felony, and they didn't take criminal history into account. Mm-hmm. So as the U.S. attorney, Rudy was right there with us, and he was a tremendous asset. So I look at the politicians and the decisions they make and who they pander to, and they pander to the people that wield the checkbooks.
That's right. It's all about money. Doesn't matter
about money.
Whether it's an R, whether it's an R or D after their name. It doesn't matter, Mike.
No, they're part of the same party.
That's
I call
right.
them Republicrats. Okay.
Yeah, right.
And when they talk about a bipartisan solution, usually what they're really talking about is collusion, especially when we're talking about immigration.
That's right.
Let's be very clear. Okay? The immigration laws have nothing to do with race, religion, or ethnicity. If they did, I couldn't have enforced those laws for 30 seconds, let alone 30 years.
Right.
If you go to Title 8, United States Code Section 1182, I'm going to say it again. Please write this down if you have a pen, or rewind, or go to my articles at front page, because I almost always include links to sections of law, because whatever I tell you is verifiable. I don't spout nonsense. I remember as a kid, if I ran my mouth at the dinner table, my dad would get real angry and say, Mike, empty barrels make a lot of noise. I was admonished to keep my mouth shut unless I could substantiate anything and everything that I said. Mm-hmm. So if you go to Title 8, United States Code Section 1182, it enumerates the categories of aliens who are to be excluded from the United States. Aliens who have dangerous communicable diseases. Mm-hmm. Think of COVID, think of Ellis Island, the quarantine station. Mm-hmm.
It's right. And that's important for people to know that history. Ellis Island was a quarantine station, correct?
Ran by public health and run by immigration authorities. Right. And if you go there, and I've been there, because my family came through Ellis Island, it was wonderful to see it. Mm-hmm. You go up that grand staircase, you'll appreciate this, Doc. You know what that staircase was? It was a cardiac test.
Mm-hmm. If you could walk up the stairs
without puffing and wheezing, you were okay.
Cardiac and
pulmonary. They stationed people along the stairs to see if people were, pull him out. He's a problem. He can't work. Okay? So it was a cardiac test because they didn't have the sophisticated equipment we have today. That's what it was for. If you had a disease and it was contagious, you didn't get to America. And there were no getaways because you were on an island that was built up by the debris, believe it or not, that came from tunneling for the subway system. Ellis Island. They did the same thing on the West Coast. I think it's called Angel Island. The idea was you're not getting off the island unless we put you on a boat and bring you to the mainland to protect the population from various bacterial diseases, from viruses, from illness. There were no getaways. There were no abscondees. You couldn't abscond. You couldn't get to the mainland. All right? And if they had to split up families, so be it. So families were given the choice. Your wife can come in with the kids, but sir, you have a bad disease. You're not getting in. We're sending you back to Italy, England, Ireland, wherever they came from. You're going home. Unless your family wants to go back with you, you're going to have to say goodbye to your wife and kids. And this played out quite frequently. Nobody wants to talk about it, but that was the harsh reality to protect the American population. And then on that list are aliens who are criminals and terrorists and spies and human rights violators, fugitives from justice, aliens who've been previously deported, aliens who lied on their applications, or aliens who, if they work, would displace American workers and drive down wages. In other words, our immigration laws were designed to protect public health, public safety, national security, and the jobs and wages of Americans. Very simple. And yet the Republicans, our heroes, gave us the visa waiver program, gave us the amnesty under the Reagan administration, gave us the diversity visa. The Republicans refused to build the wall that Donald Trump wanted to build. And we were told it was a wall of hate. The wall wasn't designed to keep anybody out of the United States, but to funnel all people and all commerce through ports of entry so they could be vetted. When you go to a baseball game, you go through a gate. You don't traipse across the field, especially when the game is in progress.
Very true.
Right?
Right.
When you go to the airport, I don't think anybody in their right mind would get on an airplane if they saw people sneaking past TSA that conduct a very similar inspection to keep the airplane safe. But it's not just the southern border. And this southern border thing is a ploy. And the American people have been so well conditioned that when I write articles, if I say anything about the border and I look at the comments, people don't even read the article. It's pitiful, folks. It's pitiful. Run 50,000 volts of electricity, barbed wire, concertine wire, make it 200 feet tall, make it 1,000. Folks, the border wall isn't going to stop illegal immigration. It helps. Security is done in layers, okay? If you look at the White House, right, there's the big gates, and then the buildings are fortified, and there are safe rooms within and that's how it's layers. When I testified for Sheila Jackson Lee before Sheila lost her mind, they did a hearing about alien smuggling. I said, we need to talk about visas. And I convinced her by saying that a properly administered visa requirement, in essence, moves America's borders out to the embassies and consulates where visas are issued. So they used the terminology for the title of the hearing, pushing out the borders. To this day, when they do hearings about visas, they very often incorporate that term, pushing out the borders.
That's right.
Okay? That's all we're talking about. This isn't anti-immigrant. You're not antisocial if you lock your door at night when you're told that there are people roaming the neighborhood after sunset looking to burglarize and invade people's homes. You do it to protect yourself and your family, which is your first obligation, safety first. And
exactly.
Yet, when Trump wanted to build the wall to help the beleaguered Border Patrol, the Republicans refused to give him the money.
That's right.
Why? Why? Nobody in the Republican Party is... See, if I was running the Republican Party, I'd be running ads every 30 minutes, public service announcements. God knows they've gotten enough corporate money in their coffers. It's overflowing. They don't know what to do with their money, truthfully. Why aren't you running every 30 minutes an ad, like the way we did for cigarettes, warning about fentanyl, warning about cocaine, instead of allowing the lunatic left to legalize drugs and provide hypodermic syringes and shooting up galleries, which sends a dangerous message and destroys how many lives and how many families and hollows out America, which seems to be the goal.
Exactly.
Why not warn people that, hey, don't take drugs other than the drugs you can purchase at a pharmacy, because there are drugs out there that aren't what they appear. They are laced with fentanyl, and those deaths aren't overdoses. They're poisonings.
That's right. Absolutely.
Drug overdose. No, drug overdose is the guy that loads up a hypodermic syringe with heroin that's more potent than he thought it was, and it kills him. That's an overdose. But when someone takes candy laced with fentanyl,
That's right.
or thinks he's taking an aspirin laced with fentanyl, that is a poisoning.
That's exactly it.
And how many people have committed crimes to support their drug habits that goes beyond the 100,000 people who die of drug poisoning? How many people are behind the wheel of vehicles who crash and kill and injure people because they shouldn't be driving? How many people commit mass shootings who are operating under the influence of drugs? What I'd love to see is when there's a mass shooting, that we should know what the toxicology report says. When there's a terrible car crash, and unfortunately it happens all too frequently, the first thing you see in the news report, Dave, you've seen them everywhere in the country, the driver had a blood alcohol level that was 3 times the legal limit. Right there, boom, in the headline. Right? Guy was drunk, he crashed and killed 3 kids on a school bus. Right? We see that. Why are we not being told how many people involved in mass shootings were operating that firearm under the influence of drugs or alcohol? When my dad handed me the keys to the family car, he said, Mike, that car is as lethal a weapon as a gun, maybe more lethal, be careful. Right? Yet you have states giving driver's licenses to illegal aliens who can't prove their identities even after 9/11, even after the 9/11 Commission, to which I provided testimony, made it abundantly clear that it was multiple failures of the immigration system that enabled the attacks to take place. We see headlines around the world, airplanes not being used in terror attacks, but motor vehicles are, and that's why there's all these barriers all over the world against car bombs and truck bombs, but we're giving people licenses to get them behind the wheels of vehicles without knowing who they are. I wonder if a place like Indiana that's contemplating this madness right now would give a carry permit for a gun to somebody who couldn't prove who he or she was. But yet the wording of their driver privilege card, as they call it, states if the person can't prove their identity. So you're going to allow someone to drive a motor vehicle without knowing who in blazes they are, but I guarantee you they wouldn't give a carry permit to someone under the same circumstances. So the decisions being made by the politicians are not in our best interest, and look at the consequences.
Yeah, they're huge.
When Kamala Harris says, we're going to get to the root cause of all this illegal immigration, the root cause are the policies of this administration that lay out the Welcome Act.
And the lack of enforcement.
And the lack of enforcement.
Right.
But this is active on their part.
Oh,
the
yeah.
lack of enforcement is not doing.
That's right.
What they are doing, it's omission and commission, right? So you come here, we'll put you up in a hotel. They have an omnibus spending bill, $4 billion. $4 billion, with a B. $4 billion allocated to deal with the border crisis. Not one penny to be used for any kind of an enforcement action, but to provide housing, medical treatment, et cetera, to people who shouldn't be here. Really? Wow. That's better than we're doing for our own citizens. So you're shocked? Don't break into my house, but we have the best Chateaubriand in the freezer. We have fantastic champagne. We have jewelry upstairs, including a bunch of gold Rolex watches, but please don't break into my house.
And, Mike, and you've mentioned this before on the radio, and all the water you can drink.
All the water, yes. So that brings us to another interesting point.
It is very interesting, because people don't think about this.
Well, I did, and it freaked people out, because I was going to teach debate on the college level. Words matter, and concepts matter. And Trump should have beat the snot out of Biden at the debate. He didn't, because I don't think he even understood why there was a debate. It wasn't about beating up Joe Biden. That was an elder abuse as far as I'm concerned, okay?
Yeah, right.
He was there because the media had censored his communication to the American people. Many Americans had never even heard him.
Yeah.
This was his opportunity to speak directly to Americans. And the one question he should have asked Biden was not, Joe, can you spell law enforcement? Oh, my God, I wanted to cry. It should have been, Joe, have you read the 9/11 Commission report? Giving people identity documents without the ability to conduct an interview, let alone a field investigation. When they were pushing comprehensive reform, and they're doing it again, I gave it a new name that Jeff Sessions, who at the time was a senator from Alabama, quoted me on 3 separate days during the floor debate in the Senate, because in my op-ed for the Washington Times, I suggested renaming comprehensive immigration reform with a more honest and descriptive name. I suggested calling it the Terrorist Assistance and Facilitation Act. Now I would suggest we call it the Overwhelm America act. And to that point, there's a serious drought in the West. River bottoms are now exposed. Old cars, dead bodies, all kinds of stuff being exposed to the light of day because they were, thrown into the rivers decades ago. This is a serious drought. Now, we could talk about why climate changes, and I believe these are natural things that happen cyclically because the sun is a variable star. We can go into all kinds of scientific principles. But that apart from it, we know there is a drought, and we know it's super serious, okay? Livestock in Texas are being put down because they don't have the water to give them water or to grow the crops they need to eat. That's how bad this drought is. It is a crisis. So now think about this. It's been said that Biden's policies have permitted the influx of at least 5 million aliens who shouldn't be here. 5 million. 5 million. Think about that. That's the population of many huge cities, right?
Yeah,
an entire city. And we don't even know what's coming in from the rest of there's a crisis on the northern border. CBP admits almost 900,000 people through ports of entry every day, according to their own statistics. And we don't even know what standards they're using now to vet these people coming in. Most of the terrorists came through international airports. And according to CBP, in 2022, on a typical day, 263,000 people were admitted through international airports. This is CBP's own statistics. But having said that, every person who's here needs 100 gallons of water per day on average. Not just for drinking or brushing your teeth or taking showers, right? For cooking, for all sorts of purposes. I went to a number of websites, and the round ballpark figure is 100 gallons per day. It could be 80, it could be 105. So let's round it off and say 100.
100.
That means, now think of this, folks, every single day, 24/7, every day, 500,000 gallons of water are being consumed by people who shouldn't be here. 500,000 gallons of water per day being consumed by people who shouldn't be here. Thank you, Joe Biden. Why is nobody on the other side raising these issues? I know they may not be the sharpest knives in the drawer, but they have to be smart enough to figure this out.
Wait, Mike, not 500,000, isn't 500 million?
500 million.
Yeah. So 500 million gallons of water a day.
500 million. Because 5 million people, 100 gallons of water per day. Do the math. 500. Thank you for making that point. Yes, I made a mistake.
Yeah, 500 million.
500 million gallons of water per day in a drought.
In a drought.
How is this sensible or rational?
No.
Okay? They talk about green, go electric. Everyone who's here turns a light switch on, needs electricity. The power grid can't power all the electric cars they want to put on the road. And no one is talking about the damage to the environment, mining for the materials, whether it's lithium or all these other substances, and what happens to the batteries when they pass their useful time. I mean, this is an ecological crisis. But all we're hearing is climate change, and everybody locks up, and they don't think about the right questions to ask. Voltaire, the French philosopher, said you judge a person's intelligence by the questions they ask. But the Democrats don't want you to ask questions. No. They know they don't have answers for you.
Or do the Republicans?
No, absolutely.
Right?
No, you're 100% right.
Because, Mike, we have a new Speaker of the House, right? Oh, it's all going to be different. It's all going to be different. Mike, tell me if I'm wrong on this. But when you look at McCarthy and things he has said and indicated, tell me the difference of what McCarthy has said and appears is going to do that's any different from what we've had over the past, number of decades. Tell me.
No, I don't think he's going to tear up anyone's State of the Union address. So that's I'm greatly
worried. No, I understand. No, but on immigration.
No, I'm being facetious. Right. Look, so McCarthy is out there, and Fox News asked him a question. You're opposed to amnesty, right? And McCarthy immediately veers off. And Fox News headline didn't say that was what he said. They said, McCarthy against amnesty. No, he's not. Because McCarthy said, and he was down on the border, when you look at the way the southern border is, how could we possibly consider an amnesty now? Now? What about next week? What about when the Democrats say, okay, we'll secure the border? Okay, we'll give you amnesty. What does one have to do with the other? The Constitution, Article 4, Section 4 says the states are to be provided with a Republican form of government and protection against invasion and domestic violence.
Mm-hmm.
If this isn't an invasion, I need a new dictionary, number one. Number two, why is he offering it? They didn't say to him, under what circumstances would you consider amnesty? That would have been a fair answer.
Right.
No, you're against amnesty, right? Well, when the border looks, really, at which border? The southern border. We now know that there's a manifold increase in illegal immigration across the northern border. I think it's always been that way.
Mm-hmm.
But now they suddenly decided to take a look at the border.
Right. And they're saying it's like 800% or something, right? 800%,
yes.
right?
Some crazy number.
Right.
All right. And by the way, all it took was 19 terrorists on 9/11 to kill more people than we lost to the entire Japanese fleet at Pearl Harbor. Okay? And by the way, why is no one talking about interior enforcement? And this is really the critical issue.
This is the key that you have pointed out, and it is really important.
Yeah.
Interior enforcement, because of that $4 billion in that huge albatross of a budget bill, Mike, or a funding bill, not even a budget bill. There was, and tell me if I'm wrong, there was nothing.
No.
As it relates to interior enforcement, which is the key, as you've pointed out.
Yes, and also you have Mayorkas. Everyone says we have to impeach Mayorkas. They don't need to impeach him. They should indict him, okay? The damage he has done, and he was a known quantity. I wrote about him on December 20th, 2020, when Biden won the election, and they said Mayorkas was going to head up DHS.
Yeah.
Mayorkas was the head of Citizenship and Immigration Services. Now, this is an agency that's never discussed in the media. Now, you mentioned in my bio that I was an adjudicator for a year, and I was. I did the marriage interviews like you've seen in the movies. Mm-hmm. It was a great learning experience, by the way, to learn how to do a good interview and pin people down and so forth. I really thought that all agents should have to have done the kind of rotation that I wound up doing inadvertently, being an inspector, being an adjudicator. I was in every squad within the investigations branch. I had a friend who became an oral surgeon, and he did autopsies. He did all kinds of, he assisted in surgery. He actually wound up getting a license also as an anesthesiologist. And I said, but all you're doing is working on someone's mouth. He said, yeah, but Mike, if I put somebody under and I can't wake them up, I better know how to deal with them. Right. So for me to get he got his degree from Tufts. He said, they will not give me my certification unless I do a surgical rotation, because you're on your own. You're in that office by yourself with a patient who maybe is dying. You better know how to resuscitate them. Mm-hmm, you better know how to give immediate emergency care. Mm-hmm. He said it's more than the person's mouth, and that makes perfect sense. And I said the same thing about immigration, okay? People don't think about it, but it really opened my eyes to the totality. And then working narcotics investigations added yet another dimension. And I've worked on terrorism investigations. My first fraud investigation caused me, for example, to trip over a terror plot in Israel back in 1976, and we ultimately prevented the bombing of an oil refinery. So that led to a wonderful working relationship with the Israeli National Police. This isn't about Latinos. You have Fox News saying, we've got to stop this identity politics, right? No more identity politics. And then the very next segment, they talk about the likelihood that Latinos would vote for a Republican. You just said we're not supposed to be dealing with identity politics. What does immigration have to do with Latinos? I got an award from the government of Japan. How many Latinos are Japanese? Right? This is about people, because human nature is human nature.
Right.
It is universal. If you cut someone's hand, I don't care what the color of their skin is, their blood is always red.
That's right.
I've never seen anybody with green, yellow, or polka dot blood, okay? You're a doctor. I don't think you have.
I operated on over 15,000 people and never saw any other color than
red blood? I don't think so.
Right.
So human nature is universal, okay? But again, this is about race. It's about discrimination. It's about all kinds of nonsense. These are all the fables and fairy tales. It's about keeping people out who pose a threat to public safety, public health, national security, or the jobs of Americans. That's all we're talking about. This is common sense, fundamental law. Okay? And I spoke at an event yesterday in New Jersey, and I asked the audience, I said, do you folks care if I came by the Garden State Parkway or the Jersey Turnpike or took local streets? And they said, why should we care? Mm-hmm. Why do you ask? Mm-hmm. I said, well, does it matter how an illegal alien enters the United States as long as they're able to get in? When I used to do closed-door sessions with Congress, and those were much more productive than the hearings. I did over 17 hearings in the House and Senate, 5-minute clock, and maybe they don't ask the right questions. When you have a closed-door session, it's freewheeling. There's no time limit. And I asked them a question. How many times does an aspiring illegal alien have to attempt to enter the United States before they succeed? And the chairman of the subcommittee said, Mr. Cutler, are you telling me there's a number? I said, no, there's a formula. He said, what's the formula? I said, it's one more than the number of times they try to get in.
Right.
If they get stopped by the Border Patrol 10 times and they make it on the 11th, then that's it.
Right.
They're here. And we do nothing about it except give them everything they want. Probably my most plagiarized statement going back to shortly after 9/11 was to tell people that nobody would break into the amusement park if they couldn't get to go on the rides. And the corollary is no one stays at the amusement park. At the end of the day, when they turn off the lights and shut down the rides, everyone heads for the exit. And yet we provide every possible incentive for people to violate our borders and violate our laws and shield them. And by the way, Ronald Reagan did incredible damage.
He did.
He not only
right.
gave us the amnesty, but the amnesty file was sacrosanct. Let me explain what that means, because everyone wants to explain it away. Folks, don't have favorites in politics. You're not their favorite. You shouldn't be looking at them and say, oh, this is my guy. You don't have a guy. If he was elected to office or she was elected, you don't have that person. All right. The person writes the check. They have that person. All right. Understand this, please. Money talks, right?
Right.
So everyone said, oh, Ted Kennedy did. Well, first of all, I like what Harry Truman said. The buck stops here. I don't care who convinced you of what. You ultimately put your name on it.
That's right.
Right. If my boss said to me, shoot that guy, like Miss Babbitt was shot at the Capitol, you're supposed to bear responsibility. Unless, I guess, it's the insurrection.
Yeah, right.
What happened, by the way, let me be very clear, it never should have happened.
Right, I agree.
It was disgraceful, it was horrible. But why is no one talk about the attack on the White House that left over 70 Secret Service officers injured?
Right.
And set a fire set in a church.
Yeah.
There's been wrongs on both sides of the aisle. And if we're going to continue to be tribal and point at the other side, we're done. We're done. Both sides are screwed up. Both sides are corrupt, and neither side gives a rat's tail about you, my friends. Let me tell you that.
That's true.
Okay? We are speed bumps. You know, politicians are like that high school jock that wants to spend the night with that very pretty cheerleader and the morning after can't remember her name. They want your vote. They want your campaign contribution, and they want you to shut the hell up afterwards.
That's right. Right.
How many people get elected and won't even attend a town hall meeting with the people they're supposed to serve? Think about that. And I don't care who that politician is. If they won't attend a town hall meeting, they need to be fired. If my boss said, Mike, we're having a meeting at 0800 tomorrow morning, I couldn't say, gee, I was planning to sleep in. I don't think so.
Yeah, right.
All right. But so the issue here is interior enforcement, because these folks are going to get in one way or the other. And if you don't remove them, and they know they can get away with whatever they want to get away with, they're drawn to sanctuary cities that harbor and shield them in violation of 8 USC 1324, harboring, aiding, abetting, concealing, inducing, all felonies. If you or I did it, they come knock on your door and take you away in handcuffs.
Right.
Sanctuary cities engage in those activities. And so that we're being told, well, if we had mandatory E-Verify, this is something that we're now hearing from Nikki Haley. Well, we need mandatory E-Verify. It should have been there. It's another one of those things that part of the Reagan employer sanctions bill wasn't there. Why? There were so many things that weren't done. It was done simply to be able to sell America and Americans on the amnesty program.
That's right.
Okay? They never hired more agents to go after the employers.
No.
Think about that.
No, that's right.
And the amnesty files were sacrosanct. What does that mean? Well, if let's say the FBI came to me, remember I had desks at these other agencies. It was a routine thing. We would share information. The FBI, not so much. They were always a problem, but that's the FBI. We used to call them famous but incompetent when we were being polite. Sometimes effing bunch of idiots. Now, don't mind you, some of them were very dedicated, great people. For a while before I met my wife, I dated a gal who was an FBI agent. And I have tremendous respect for the agents. But the agency's mentality, up at DEA, everyone was treated the same. Not at the FBI. At ATF, if you had a badge and you were out there, everyone was the same. The Bureau had this elitist kind of a mindset, and they took credit for statistics generated by other law enforcement agencies. They were notorious for that, okay? And there were some off-color jokes I could share, but I won't. But the bottom line was that's who the FBI is. That's how they operate. They're all about publicity, and they knew how to work the press machine, okay? But they would come to me and say, Mike, we're working on a case. This guy just shot 4 people. We need his immigration file. I would give him the file. I would pull out third agency material, reports issued by other agencies, because I didn't have the authority to give them. That's third agency rule, which is why when Bush cut immigration in half, he created a third agency nightmare. Because now I couldn't show all the materials that related to immigration. Right. Made it as unwieldy as possible by design, because Bush is a globalist.
Yeah, that's right.
Why Jeb said that illegal immigration was an act of love. I wrote a commentary in which I said that Jeb was looking for love in all the wrong places. Okay.
Very true.
Okay. So DHS, when it was created, violated the Homeland Security Act. They were never supposed to fold other agencies in. They weren't supposed to cut it in half. Everything and by the way, it was the Republicans who called them out.
That's right.
John Hostetler, Jim Sensenbrenner, Lamar Smith. They had the guts to stand up to the president. I can't tell you how many times my phone would ring, and I'd look at caller ID, and I knew it was a subcommittee, and I'd answer the phone and say, okay, what did he do now? Meaning Bush. And they said, you're not going to believe it. I said, if he did something good, I'm not going to believe it. Yeah. And they laughed, and I laughed, and I go to testify, which was an interesting position to be called upon by the oversight committees, and not just one, but several, to offer a counterpoint to the President of the United States of America. It was kind of an interesting position to be in. But one of the interesting things was we were supposed to turn over the files to these other agencies. Right. A New York City cop comes to me. We're investigating a homicide. We found 3 people dead in the apartment, both all shot in the head. We think this is the guy. Can we see the file? We give them the file. They would sign a release. Detective Schmidlap reviewed the file on such and such day for a routine investigative matter. Boom. And he would have access to the photographs, the addresses, the names of families. So they had investigative leads to pursue somebody who committed a murder or was believed to have, right?
Right.
The amnesty file had a big red flag. And you know what the flag said? Do not release, or words to that effect. If I gave the FBI an amnesty file because of Mr. Reagan's law, the Immigration Reform and Control Act of '86, he enacted it. He did. The FBI came and said, Mike, there is a man with an atom bomb in the back of a truck. We think he's planning to blow up Midtown Manhattan. We have an hour. We got to get this guy. We have no photos. Do you have a photo? If his photo was only in the amnesty file and I gave him the photo, you know what you call that? A felony.
Yeah.
I could have gone to jail. Why? Why is it that if a person became a naturalized citizen, I had to turn over the entire file? If the person was here illegally, I had to turn over the entire file. If the guy got amnesty, the amnesty portion had to be taken out and locked up in a safe place, and whatever was left, if there was anything left.
Right, that's right.
They could get the crumbs.
Right.
And if it meant no photograph or no recent addresses, kaboom! Put your fingers in your ears. We're going to hear a loud noise. Why? These bills did not live up to the reason they were passed, to protect the jobs and wages of Americans and lives of Americans. And it's only gotten worse. And it's only gotten worse. And now Biden is using the refugee concept as a way of getting people in and making it palatable. Right? These are asylum seekers. No, they're not. Asylum, and most of these reporters on TV, even the ones with law degrees, don't understand. Asylum isn't because you live in a dumbass country with miserable conditions. No, it's because of you.
That's right.
You, because of your race, your religion, your ethnicity, tribal affiliation, sexual orientation, or political beliefs, face persecution or worse in your home country. And it doesn't have to be a poor country. It could be a wealthy country. But if you are being discriminated against to the point of being persecuted or worse because of race, religion, ethnicity, sexual orientation, or political beliefs, then we will take care of you. The people that are coming in are economic refugees, except there is no such animal. So when they call them asylum seekers, it sounds sympathetic.
Right.
I wrote an article for Front Page, and I said to call these people, and we know this is all a scam, to call them asylum seekers is the same as referring to a homeless person who buys a lottery ticket as an aspiring millionaire.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
How does that work?
No, it does work. It brings it right home.
And so there is this mythology. Now, what we've done by admitting millions of people who applied for asylum is we filled the asylum coffers, the stack, right, with millions of applications. The 9/11 Commission said that many of the terrorists applied for asylum. So that means we won't even be able to review the cases.
Right.
So we'll get to them in 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 years, maybe the 12th of never. What did we just do? We just exploded national security.
Right.
Now they're using the visas that we give to victims of crimes. So they're going to exploit that legal system just the way they did with DACA. By the way, the word alien is so terrible, but everyone forgot that the DREAM Act is actually an acronym for Development, Relief, and Education of
Aliens.
Alien minors.
Yeah.
So suddenly the word alien is palatable when it coincides with this fake narrative they've created. And people say, well, but it's only about the children. I said, really, what's the age cutoff? What,
right.
15? I said, no. They claim they came by the time they were 15, but they could be in their mid to late 30s.
That's right.
See, if they said to me as an immigration officer, any child who comes in who's under the age of 18 with documentation from their school and so forth, I would agree. I'd say, you know what, we should probably do that. That's fair. But when you say you could be as old as 35, 37, originally it was 37. Why? Because demographers back then, when Obama did this to us, said that it was believed that 90% of all illegal aliens were under the age of 37. So this was a backdoor way of doing comprehensive immigration reform. And now you got McCarthy, without prompting, saying, well, we can't do that until we secure the border. Well, guess who processes those applications? It's not the Border Patrol, and it's not even ICE. It's the Citizenship and Immigration Services adjudicators who already are processing probably over 10 million applications per year. Then they're processing applications without an interview, folks. So people will say, like we've seen these talking heads on TV, well, these people have been here at least 10 years. Well, under the law, if you've been here over 10 years and you have a family member who's a resident alien or a citizen and your deportation would impose a hardship, we can arrange for you to stay here. But that's done on a case-by-case basis where you conduct an investigation, you make sure they really have that familiar relationship, that they don't have a criminal history, and you find out when they entered. Because right now, if you can't do an interview and you have no resources for an investigation, how do you know how long an illegal alien has been living here? There's no magic wand. No. Fingerprinting them doesn't do anything. People think, oh, we'll run the fingerprints and we'll know what the blood type was of his great aunt. No, it doesn't work that way. I did these investigations. You go out with a photograph and you knock on doors and you say, do you know this guy? Oh, that's Charlie. Yeah, he's been living there for the last 8 years. And before that, he lived in the Bronx. Okay. And then you go to the Bronx and you find out what, and you verify, yep, this guy's been here for the last 12 and a half years. Cool. And we would approve it. But very often you'd go there and they'd say, I've never seen that guy before. Who is he? Well, he claims he's been living here. Well, talk to the landlord. You go to the landlord. He said, no, there's this little old lady who's been living in that apartment for the last 20 years. I don't know this guy. The solution there is prosecute him for fraud to discourage people from doing this.
Right.
We had a problem with people getting married but not really living together, right? The marriage fraud cases. I became part of a task force. That's how I became an adjudicator. So we started to interview them. They had no idea they were going to be interviewed. So it was funny. They were talking about 2 different addresses, and within a week or 2, they realized they're going to be interviewed, so they started to get their act together. But they still didn't really think we were serious, so I would say, well, where did you live? I lived in the basement apartment of a private house. And where was your apartment? Oh, I was on the top floor, and there was an elevator in the building. I don't think they're living together. So they got better and better at concealing the lies, and then I used to make copies of their house keys, and the keys didn't match, and it was an interesting education. And once we started to deport the aliens who were getting these benefits, supposedly, they stopped. Because suddenly the woman would say, we actually had access to the welfare computer. So we found that this woman has 4 children getting welfare, claim to not be married. And she comes to us and says, I have a husband. So I'd say, well, wait a moment. Do you want us to go back to welfare and tell them that you're married and you're going to lose your check? Or do you want to tell me the truth? I said, because most people, and I made it up, I said, most people get $5,000. And this was back in the 70s. She said, $5,000? That bum only gave me $800. Oh, really? Would you like to sign a statement, or do you want us to investigate this because you've committed a felony by conspiring to defraud the immigration system? So the woman would give us a statement. I never lived with him. This is how I met him. and then we would go and arrest the guy, and we wouldn't even prosecute him. We would simply deport him. Mm-hmm. So suddenly, there was something to be lost by having an application filed. And you know what happened?
The
number of applications went
plummeted.
through the floor. We were sitting around waiting for applications. We were overwhelmed in the beginning, and within 6 months, there was a reduction by like 3/4 of the number of applications. Why? Because suddenly they realized that if they committed fraud, there would be a consequence.
Yeah, that's right.
And that's the solution to all of this. I call it deterrence through enforcement. And you have Mayorkas telling people, I don't care what the circumstances are, approve every application on your desk. The FBI, and this was documented in a multi-part ABC News report and in an Inspector General report. The FBI went to Mayorkas along with Homeland Security Investigations and said, there's a company filing these EB-5 treaty investor visas. They are linked to a possible terrorist group operating out of Iran. You must deny the applications. He said, I will not. I will not. You want to talk about malfeasance? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And when the Republicans told the Democrats this guy is a nightmare, they said, that's wonderful. So it's not enough to simply get rid of him, because I guarantee you that since the 2015 or whenever he worked for Obama, he brought in all of his own little acolytes who are of the same mindset. Mm-hmm. They need to clean house. They need to reconfigure the agencies.
That's right.
Do you know that he even made a statement, Mayorkas, that when people lie to get citizenship, they will take no action because if you're an American, we're going to protect you. Unless you're an American who files a tax return.
Right.
Okay?
Yeah.
So we know that the terrorists were counseled to get citizenship before they took any action. Because once you have 2 passports, you can cover your tracks by alternating passports as you travel around the world. In fact, when our guys raided the bin Laden compound, they found a copy of the 9/11 Commission report and an application for U.S. citizenship. The immigration is at the heart of national security, public safety, and public health. Mm-hmm. And when people look at the way the economy fails them, believe it or not, a big part of that is because we're importing an army of foreign workers who add insult to injury by sending their money out of the country, which pleases all these money remitters, whether it's banks, whether it's Western Union. When Tom Tancredo said that he was going to tax money being wired out of the country, Charlie Fote, the head of First Data Corporation, moved his company from Atlanta to Colorado, where Tancredo was. By the way, First Data was the parent organization to Western Union. All right? All because Tancredo said, we're going to tax the remittances being wired out of the country. And immediately, they formed a political action committee to oppose Tom Tancredo because he was posing a threat to their profits.
That's right.
That's what this is all about.
Money.
So now they're calling these people migrants. I briefly want to touch on this. I know we're running long, forgive me. But, there's so much here.
There is. It's huge.
We could do an hour a week for a year and not cover everything, folks. Mm-hmm. It's that, and that's why I urge you to go read my articles at front page. But here's the point, though. If you look at all the damage being done, and you look at the ways that the system is being gamed, and we're being told now, under Carter, we couldn't call aliens. Terrible. Why? Because it provides clarity, and con artists hate clarity. The term alien is not an insult, and it's not a pejorative. It's a legal term that simply means any person not a citizen or national of the United States. Mm-hmm. That's like me saying Dave is a good friend of mine, and he is, but he's not my relative. Mm-hmm. Good for him. You should meet some of my family.
Mine too. Right?
But the point is that's a statement of fact. Dave is my friend, but he's not a relative. Right? The man is a good guy, but he's not an American. Okay? That's what we're saying.
That's right.
And if we go to Canada, Mexico, unless you're a dual national, you become an alien, and it's not an insult. It's a statement of political reality, right?
Right.
So they said, we're going to call them anything but that. We're going to call them undocumented immigrants. So if you're opposed to them, you're anti-immigrant. And since immigrants built America, you're anti-American. And it's been insult and thuggery and beating up on people that they disagree with because they don't want the debates because they know they can't win the debates. So they are the bullies. The people that wanted to protect you from the bullies are, in fact, the bullies themselves. Mm-hmm. All right?
True.
Think about that.
True.
So we don't know how to defend ourselves any longer. We sit in the corner, suck our thumb, and ask for a comfort puppy because we're upset. God help America. This isn't how America was built. America was built by a lot of toxic masculinity. My dad, as a construction worker, had tons of masculinity, as did his buddies. We're changing our country and not for the better.
True.
Right? But now they're calling them migrants. Mm-hmm. Migrant has nothing to do with immigration. There are many migrant workers who travel from place to place within America looking for work. Migrant farmers, for example.
Right.
And in fact, Cesar Chavez, who started the Farm Workers Union, was opposed to illegal alien migrant farmers because it was destroying jobs and wages for Americans.
That's right.
He actually advocated violence, which I certainly don't.
No.
Not even close. This needs to be a war of words, not a war of anything else.
Right,
okay,
right.
let's be crystal clear. Let's be 1,000% clear. That's why I did debate. Debate is intellectual capitalism. You bring your ideas to the marketplace of the stage. Your opponent does the same, and then the consumers, the judges, and the audience decide what they want to buy. That's why debate is brilliant and essential. That's why two heads work better than one. Okay, no one has all the answers, right?
Right.
But now they're calling them migrants, which again obfuscates the truth.
Right.
What we should really be calling them are clients.
Interesting.
They are clients of immigration law firms.
Yeah, that's right.
They are clients of NGOs, non-government organizations, that laughably refer to themselves as nonprofits.
Right.
Nonprofits.
Right.
$4 billion are about to go to nonprofits.
Right.
Think about that.
No.
There was a case, in fact, where, Judicial Watch did the report. I wrote a piece about this for Front Page, and they based their piece on an OIG Inspector General report. It turns out that a company, an NGO, nonprofit, got over $100 million contract. They never worked for the government, at least not immigration. I think they did some military work at one point. But they got $100 million, no competitive bid contract. Why is that? That's like Halliburton and Cheney, right? No bid. If I dinged a fender on the bumper of my government car, I was supposed to get 3 estimates and go with the cheapest estimate. Alan Shepard famously remarked about sitting on top of a rocket. He said, think about sitting on top of a bomb built by the lowest bidder, right? That's how government is supposed to work. No bids here, folks, no competition. And they said, how could that happen? And it turned out that $17 million was paid to this nonprofit for beds never used. They did some digging. It turned out that the guy that had worked for Biden on the transition team for DHS quit his job, went to work, got a senior executive position with the nonprofit, and within a month or two, they got a no competitive bid, $100 million plus contract. Let's connect the dots. So you have to wonder how many nonprofits get all these great contracts and make campaign contributions. So like the music goes round and round, the money goes round and round. This is all money laundering, taxpayer money.
That's right.
Okay?
That's right.
So that's why I call them clients. And you have immigration lawyers on both sides of the aisle. And so understand the level of the betrayal and the impact that it's having. And when Kamala Harris says she wants to get to the root cause of illegal immigration, it's laughable. First of all, the root cause, as I started saying, is that this administration does everything possible to entice illegal aliens to come to America in violation of 8 U.S.C. 1324.
True.
Second of all, sanctuary cities further that cause. Finally, there's no interior enforcement. So these people are here. Who's going to look for them? And the Republicans are saying, we don't need 87,000 IRS agents. We need 87,000 Border Patrol agents. No, we don't. We need 87,000 ICE agents.
That's right. That's right. Internal.
We are flooded by aliens. And after the flood, you have to clean up the mess. Right? The Border Patrol mission is limited to the border. That's why they call them Border Patrol. Pretty clear.
Right.
Once you get 50 or 100 miles into the interior, they're done. They're finished. Thank you, Charlie. We'll take it from here. Who's the we? ICE. And what does ICE have? Nobody. Why? Thanks to both parties.
That's right.
You have 6,000 ICE agents, and because of the way Bush put ICE together, they're doing everything and immigration.
Right.
So they do money laundering. They do intellectual property theft and copyright violations. They're going after kiddie porn. I mean, all these crimes should be pursued, but there's other agencies that could and should be doing it.
That's right.
So 6,000 agents with a gazillion missions. You are lucky if we have 2,000 ICE agents for the entire United States of America. I don't know what the numbers are now, but at one point we had over 45,000 people at TSA, the terminally stupid administration.
Right.
Or as my friends in the military call them, thousands standing around.
Right.
Okay?
Yeah.
Border Patrol had about 20,000. We could use more. But at the end of the day, these aliens, just like when I went to Jersey, are headed for the interior, and nothing happens. And if they file applications to get green cards and citizenship, they're in. And that's the final point. You know, when you talk about building the wall, everyone says, well, you need to get a tall ladder and you can get past the wall. You don't need a tall ladder to get past the wall. I could put something in an alien's pocket that makes the wall disappear, and it weighs less than an ounce. Can you imagine that? What do you think you could put in an alien's pocket that, for all intents and purposes, makes the wall disappear?
A green card.
That's right. You've been listening.
Yeah, no.
A green card.
Yeah.
Or a U.S. passport, better
Right.
yet.
Yeah.
Right? And so we are naturalizing hundreds of thousands of aliens every year. We're rushing them through the system. It started with Bill Clinton, a program called Citizenship USA, where they gave thousands of people citizenship before fingerprints even came back. I want to talk about malfeasance. And the U.S. passport is the key to the kingdom.
That's right.
So understand what we're doing. And all that most people want to talk about is the Mexican border. It's a diversion. Not to say that the Mexican border
is an issue.
Right. It is.
Right. It is.
And not to say that we don't have a problem, because Hezbollah, and I don't know why the Republicans don't talk about it, this was an open hearing, Hezbollah is operating across Latin America with human traffickers and drug smugglers to flood people, including sleeper agents and massive quantities of narcotics, into the United States to undermine our society and to raise billions of dollars in money that Iran uses to fund terrorism around the world. They've turned Latin America into a base of operations for Hezbollah, focused on America. And yet we have a wide open border, and the Republicans knew this, and they still wouldn't give Trump the money for a border wall.
That's right.
So the bottom line is, do you really think that these politicians give a rat's ass about what's good for America or Americans? That's the question every reporter should be asking every politician.
That's right.
How are your policies in the best interest of the average American? How are your policies in the best interest of the survival of our nation? And understand that our adversaries are lining up and salivating.
Absolutely.
After the debacle in Afghanistan. And by the way, we've had translators now who have been prosecuted for working with ISIS. A couple prosecutions underway. The head of counterintelligence for the FBI in New York. New York has the biggest counterintelligence operation because of the UN. These are the spy catchers. I think I mentioned I had dated a gal at one point who worked for the FBI. She was part of that program. The guy that ran that program had every one of those agents answered to him, has been arrested and charged with taking money from a Russian oligarch when he was still in charge of counterintelligence. And who corrupted him? A former Russian operative here in the United States who was a translator, and he was here as a diplomat. He ultimately supposedly retired. And then guess what? We allowed him to become an American, which is fine. He looked at America. He was here for decades, said, I like this country better. Nothing wrong with that. But then he was able to get a security clearance and become a translator for the U.S. courts and federal agencies. How do you do a background investigation on a former diplomat for one of America's biggest enemies? Do you think that they helped with the background investigation? It's one thing if the guy had worked for the Israelis or the Brits or the Canadians. That's cool. Look, I had plenty of meetings with all those people. In fact, my relationship with Israel was such that if I asked for a dossier on one of their citizens because we were doing a drug investigation, within 48 hours, they would actually fly a diplomatic pouch to New York with everything we could ever want to know about that individual. I was able to post lookouts at Ben Gurion and Lud airports. When we worked on a narcotics investigation involving the Israeli mob, the Israeli National Police sent us a half dozen of their officers to sit on the wiretaps because translators would otherwise not understand the jargon of the criminals, but they did. So if you had an Israeli who said, I want to be a translator, I wouldn't have a problem with it, because I guarantee you that they're as trustworthy as are the Canadians, as are the Brits. We work very closely with the RCMP and so forth. But the Russians? And then this same Russian allegedly got this former FBI boss to get the woman of another oligarch, she was in college, to have a meeting at the NYPD because she wanted a job at the New York City Police Department with a specialty of counterterrorism and counterintelligence, and he arranged the meeting, allegedly, this FBI boss. Oh, by the way, he was also involved with the inception of an operation you may have heard.
Crossfire Hurricane.
Crossfire Hurricane, yes, that went after Trump and his associates. Now, is it possible, this is pure conjecture, and I hate speculation, that's not who I am, but is it possible that this translator really didn't retire? That was his cover story, and he was told, see if you can undermine the credibility of the U.S. government.
Boom.
Because when you undermine the political legitimacy of a government, revolution generally follows.
That's right.
So for him to suddenly be working with this FBI boss who helped to start Crossfire Hurricane, could it be that he did so with the incentive of this individual? I don't know. There's no indication in the media. I'm just throwing a question out there. This is only a
very reasonable question, especially when we know the end result, right?
And the whole thing about being an agent is to play hunches and to follow your curiosities, which is how I uncovered the terror plot in Israel. The guy came in with an altered visa, and when we were done with him, I found in his possession the schematic of the Israeli oil refinery written in Arabic. It was a plan to blow it up, and that's how we prevented it. So you start an investigation by asking questions. So I'm only asking a question. But understand how vulnerable we are, because we are stupid, we are corrupt, and the American people are lazy and foolish. I was giving an address to a bunch of Air Force brass, and they said to me, how do you account for the stupidity of the average American? And I said, well, I can answer that with 2 words. And they said, 2 words? I said, yeah, pet rock. If you could convince Americans to part with hard-earned money to buy a rock in a box, God help us.
Right.
We need to hold our politicians accountable and stop rooting for one politician over the other.
That's
Root
right.
for your neighbor.
Right.
And when you, and please don't say stupid things like bleeding heart liberal.
Right.
First of all, there's nothing liberal about the Democrats today. I'm a liberal. I was raised to be a liberal. Liberals celebrate the First Amendment. The first thing my parents taught me is your friends have every right in the universe to disagree with you on every single issue. It's called the First Amendment. They didn't go to high school, but they sure as hell knew about the First Amendment. And what does that mean? If your friend disagrees, you have to respect them. If you can debate them with facts, which is what I do, that's cool. But I don't care if it's abortion. I don't care if it's school prayer. I don't care what the issue is. We have an absolute positive right carved in stone that I could say what I want to say, and Dave and I can disagree, and we can still be friends, because this is not a personal thing.
Nope.
This is about ideology, and the best solutions come out of disagreements.
That's
If
right.
you read the story about how we went to the moon, there was one scientist who held firm and said we have to do lunar orbit docking. Okay? He came up, everyone, including Werner von Braun, disagreed, and he wouldn't give up, and that's eventually how he went to the moon, by doing rendezvous in lunar orbit. One voice. Challenge what you're told. Ask the questions, and when people don't allow you to ask the questions, realize what's happening. They know they can't win a debate because they're lying to you. I'm happy to debate anybody on the issues that are close to me, because I believe I have the facts and background and so forth. So I believe that I can convince you with the power of the facts and so forth. I used to argue bail for the U.S. attorneys. Normally, agents don't do that. The prosecutor does. The reason I did was because nobody got bail. Or if they did, it was in the millions of dollars. So the point of the matter is, debate is at the heart of our freedom.
Very true.
Debate is in the heart of our judicial system. And when you have people shutting down debate and canceling you, what they want to cancel are your rights as an American.
Correct.
Think about that. So speak to your neighbors, not as adversarially,
No.
but I think we all want the same things for ourselves and our kids.
Right.
We want a bright, safe, secure future where we can live out our dreams. That's what we all want, one way or the other. And if you look at our neighbors and realize that there's far more that unites us than divides us, I call that a good start. What do you think, Dave?
I think it's a great start. And I thank you, Mike, for everything you have done, are doing, and will do. I thank you for your perseverance, dedication, and sacrifice for every American. For every American. Very important. Mike,
Absolutely.
Educate our listeners in how they can follow you on a daily basis, because it's something they really must do.
Yeah, you know, the facts are very powerful. Facts are stubborn things. So I've been writing for years for Front Page Magazine, sponsored by the David Horowitz Freedom Center. Very proud of that relationship. I do my own internet radio program, the Michael Cutler Hour, Friday nights on Blog Talk Radio. If you go to the Michael Cutler Hour, you can click on the links to my podcast. And please share these materials with everybody. Let's have an honest conversation. And if we disagree, so be it. But let's disagree on facts and with objectivity, not with violence. It's very important. Let's have those discussions. And humor might even help a bit. I'll just tell you this as a parting thought. I remember when Alan Greenspan testified for Schumer, I was on a radio show the next day, and I was still in a state of rage. I actually didn't sleep that night. I was so angry. Referring to high-tech Americans as the privileged elite, when that character has mansions all over the place, including the Hamptons, right?
Yeah.
Privileged elite.
Yeah.
And so I was on the show, and I was a regular on the program. The young lady said to me, she said, Mike, what were you thinking when Greenspan made that statement? I said, well, I knew I was witnessing a first. She said, I know you well enough to know that if I ask the follow-up question, I'm going to be standing on very thin ice. But what kind of a first was it? And I could tell she was bracing herself. And I didn't disappoint. I said it was the first time I'd ever seen someone testify who was suffering from rigor mortis. She told me she spent the rest of her program mopping up her mascara. Yeah. Now, the reason from laughing so hard, the reason I tell you that is because let's be good-natured about it.
Right.
The radical left is trying to kill off comedy. They're trying to kill off any kind of disagreement. They want America to be as bland and lifeless and colorless as possible. They want an America that only exists in shades of gray. That's not what America is. No. And we can disagree with each other, and we can tease each other, and we can joke with each other as long as there's no ill intent behind the jokes. There's all kinds of humor. As long as we are respectful of each other, and we should be focusing on our similarities. And when we disagree, we should see that as a celebration of the First Amendment, something the Founding Fathers gave us through the Constitution, and something that every soldier who's put his life on the line has fought for to protect. Because without freedom of speech, there are no other freedoms at all. And by the way, finally, my own personal website is michaelcutler.net. But please use my programs and my articles as source material, not because I have all the answers. Believe me, I could fill volumes with what I don't know. And anyone who says they have all the answers, my parents warned me about them. Run for your life.
Yeah, you got that right.
But I try to provide you with facts that are based on articulable evidence. And we should all be doing that.
That's right.
Anyway, but Dave, I want to thank you for being so generous with your time and with providing me with a platform and an opportunity to address your audience, because these issues are so vital because America stands at crossroads.
Well, and I thank you, Mike. I very sincerely thank you on behalf of millions of people for all that you have done, are doing, and will do. And I thank you for your ongoing perseverance, dedication, and sacrifice on behalf of every American, and frankly, every person of the world.
And don't leave out my kids or my grandchildren, because that's true. If you're a good parent, you have to be involved with politics, because this involves your children and their future their children's children.
That's exactly.
Think about that.
And I thank you folks for joining us today. Until next time, Dave Janda signing off. Dream big and dare to fail. Thanks for your time today.